Hey, Alex Newman joins us now by Zoom chat from libertysentinel.org. Good morning to you, Alex Newman.
Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, praise be to God. We're grateful for your time. Merry Christmas to you, by the way. Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year as well. Thank you.
One of the Christmas gifts that keeps on giving is the Twitter file dumps. I think we're at 14 now. We've seen information coming out from Matt Taibbi and others about what was in all of these files. There's so much data that it's taking them a long time to go through it. But there's been a lot of stories that have come out now. COVID censorship, Russiagate, Hunter Biden suppression, just censorship in general, the Ukraine war. Have you been tracking this story? And if so, how do you see all of this information?
I have, yeah. It's very interesting. Now, I'll be the first to say I don't necessarily trust Elon Musk, but I'll also be the first to say I'm very pleased that all this information is coming out. And a lot of this, frankly, is stuff that we all knew. I mean, anybody who was paying attention knew. Anybody who had a Twitter account knew that conservatives were being shadow banned, that people were being erased for telling the truth. To me, it was obvious that this had to be coming from the government. I mean, what kind of idiot business would destroy their business model and remove their most popular user and all of his followers, all of his key people? No sensible business would do that unless they were being encouraged to do so by the government. So I'm glad that this information is coming out, if only for the benefit of those who are still stuck to CNN and refuse to see what's going on. But I think there's a lot more to go. I think we've only really scratched the surface so far with the censorship, with the Orwellian weaponization of the federal government against conservatives, against doctors. We now know, for example, as well, that there were this whole network of bots that was running around. There weren't even real people demanding lockdowns and face masks and arrests of people who refused to participate in the craziness. So I'm glad they've been exposed, but I also think that, the exposure just has to be step one. Step two needs to be accountability. These things are criminal acts. The federal government has absolutely no authority to silence Americans. And in fact, it's a felony for a federal official to try to infringe on somebody's rights under color of law. And that's exactly what happened here. These people acted like they had legal authority to demand that private companies censor Americans. That is flagrant criminality. And I think there needs to be serious punishment, serious accountability. I think we actually need prosecutions here.
Yeah. I saw one article that said Pfizer basically supplied like $1.5 million to Twitter to help fund the creation of bots that would automatically censor and flag accounts, and also help decide who gets that check mark and who doesn't. That's pretty flagrant.
Yep, it is. And, I think Pfizer also, they need to be held accountable. And some of what we're learning now is just horrific, in terms of how they lied to the public, in terms of how they worked with powerful actors, including governments, to try to silence people who were critical of their products. And I mean, there's a whole added layer of evil here, because it was taxpayers who were paying for all this, right? Taxpayers were being extorted for billions of dollars for these products that a lot of us didn't want. A lot of us, we're talking to doctors and scientists saying that these products are dangerous, they're not safe, they're not effective. Now we know that's true, right? Now the data is out. We know that regardless of whether you got the shot or not, you're probably going to get COVID. I mean, it's common wisdom. In fact, now the data shows you're more likely to get COVID, more likely to end up in the hospital, and more likely to die from COVID if you got the injections. And yet those of us who tried to point this out were banned, shadow banned, flagged for misinformation, which, that's a libel. If you're running around telling people that I'm putting out fake news and I'm putting out true news and you're the liar, that's a libel. So, I think a lot of people are taking this too lightly. These revelations are incredibly serious. This is the kind of stuff you see in totalitarian regimes. And it's not even just about the censorship. People died because honest debate was squelched and silenced. And so, I think we must have accountability here. The exposure in the Twitter files needs to be just step one of a long process.
With CDC announcing this past week that they are, in fact, going to be investigating some of these issues related to the COVID shot and cardiac arrest and strokes, does this mean we're allowed to talk about it now? I mean, do we have permission to question the narrative? Because every time we ever did here, and we're a pretty small time show, but every time we did, we would get our hands slapped, by the censor lords. Do you think you will see a change now? Beyond Twitter, I'm talking about beyond Twitter, like on YouTube or Facebook or some of these other platforms, are we allowed to have these conversations?
No, it's interesting. I was just on a show, a Christian show, and the video had, I think, almost 200,000 views on YouTube, and suddenly YouTube took it down. And they didn't explain exactly why, but we have to assume it was because we were talking about the injections. And and some of the emails that have come out now, going beyond Twitter, like some of the emails from the White House director of digital strategy or whatever his title was, Rob Flaherty, to executives at YouTube, to executives at Facebook. But this stuff is unbelievable. He's talking to these people at these social media companies like they're his personal slaves. Like, right. We demand that you take this down. And the Facebook executive responds, understood. Like, what is this? This is like the kind of behavior that you see from gangster governments, from totalitarian regimes, where there is no rule of law, where the people have no individual rights, and where everybody exists at the pleasure of the state. This is not America. And, it's incredible to me that after all of this has come out, you still can't talk about it on Facebook. You still can't talk about it. You can't even share personal stories. Right. My dad took this injection. Unfortunately, I begged him not to. And less than 36 hours later, his heart stopped. And I tried to share that and was censored for that. How can I not share a personal experience that happened in my family? It's grotesque what's happened here. And there are millions of people who've been affected by this. And again, I believe that the censorship regime is part of the reason that these issues were not caught until now. If people could have had free conversations about it, if scientists and doctors could have traded notes on what was happening through YouTube videos, through Facebook posts, we probably would have realized these things much, much earlier.
Mr. Newman, this is Rudy Carlos. Thank you for joining us here. But, I'm wondering, there's a sort of reaction that we have as Americans when we see totalitarian regimes outside, all over the world. We see, we see these things and we're outraged. Why do you think that there's a sort of a more nuanced, sort of like a weak sort of response to these things that have been released from the Twitter files by Americans?
I think there's still kind of a normalcy bias. We know that we live in a free country. And so these types of things couldn't possibly happen here. So we're just going to pretend like they're not happening here. And yet they are happening here. We still have the issue of there are millions of Americans out there who are still tuned into the very dishonest fake media. I know CNN's viewership has dropped significantly. I think they lost over a third of their viewers in 2022. And that's progress, but they still have, give or take 1 million viewers. That's a lot of people to be brainwashed. Then you add some of the other networks. And the fact is, these networks are not reporting on this stuff. You'll find almost nothing about this in the fake media. And the ABCs, the CBS, is certainly not PBS and NPR, the government-funded propaganda machine. Yeah, you're hearing about it on talk radio. Fox News and some of the others have even kind of dipped their toe in a little bit. But the reality is there are still millions of Americans who are listening to dishonest propaganda organs that, first of all, were bribed by the federal government. Billions and billions of dollars went out from the federal government to bribe media outlets to promote this vaccine. We've got the paper. We've got the documents for this. Of course, Pfizer, you can't even turn on a TV anymore without saying, this news broadcast is brought to you by Pfizer. This news broadcast is brought to you by Moderna, right? It's just nonstop. So the amount of money out there flowing, and a lot of people have testified to this, even over at Newsmax. They were firing hosts who were blowing the whistle on the vaccine. So I think a big part of it is a lot of Americans are still ignorant about it. And that's why shows like yours are so important to get this information out to people who otherwise might not hear it.
We are just about at a network break here. Alex Newman is our guest. His website is Liberty Sentinel, libertysentinel.org. And we're talking about the Twitter files. And right on the other side of the break, I want to ask about the revelation that we now learn that so many ex-CIA and FBI agents went to work for Twitter. It seems very odd to me. Why would that be? Let alone the fact that the Pentagon was running fake accounts to influence people in the Middle East. All that. Plus, I want to get Alex's take on some of the Davos topics that are related here. All that coming up right after this very quick break. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to Catholic Drive Time, keeping you informed and inspired. I'm your host, Joe McClane. So good to be on with you. Alex Newman is our guest. LibertySentinel.org is the website. We're talking about the Twitter files, sort of like the ramifications of all of this. I would say on a global scale. Alex, welcome back to the show. I want to ask you about your take on learning that so many employees at Twitter used to work for three-letter agencies, the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, and others. Like, that seems very strange. Why would there be so many former intelligence officers working in social media today? What do we make of that? Is this a nothing burger, or is there something more?
This is huge, and long before these latest revelations came out, the leadership of all these major companies, Google, Facebook, I guess they call themselves Meta now or whatever, Twitter, all these companies are totally filled with ex-CIA, ex-FBI. But really, this should have been recognized as a problem a long time ago. If you look at the history of Silicon Valley, if you look at how these giant companies were funded, how they were stood up. In almost every case, you will find the tentacles of the intelligence agencies and the security agencies everywhere, and I mean everywhere, from the initial stages. If you look at Google, they were stood up with DARPA money. DARPA is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. If you look at Facebook, Facebook got a lot of its initial money from the In-Q-Tel network. In-Q-Tel is, of course, the investment arm of the intelligence community. And so I think these institutions really should have been looked at very suspiciously from the get-go. Why is the government creating this organization that's demanding all of this information from us? Why do they need to know our birthday and what our relationship is to everybody and where we live and what our political views are? And why are people putting that there, right? It's so bizarre. And the same thing with Google. Why is the federal government involved in creating this thing that's supposed to revolutionize the internet? That's really not the role of the federal government. That's not the proper role of the federal government. So I was not surprised by any of this. In fact, I think there was really a dual purpose to all of these technologies and all of these companies. They really should be regarded as extensions of the intelligence gathering apparatus. And that should have been clear even before this. I think at this point it's now undeniable, but it's very, very serious. And to go back to what we were saying with the Twitter files, these are scandals that people should be talking about. These are scandals that people should be outraged about. And unfortunately, there's just too many people that are not paying attention and don't even know these things. And so we're just allowing this to continue.
But Mr. Newman, I've been reliably informed by people who call themselves critical thinkers that none of these are real problems. These are not things that are serious problems. The conservatives are just gaslighting. We're making things up. Traditionalists are not critical thinkers, and we need to listen to the real critical thinkers who are listening to and regurgitating the mainstream narrative. It always fascinates me that the people who are just regurgitating what they hear on CNN and MSNBC and so on and so forth call themselves critical thinkers and accuse everyone that disagrees with them with not being critical thinkers, with just going with the mainstream narrative. I guess my question is, how on earth are they convinced that they are the critical thinkers whenever they are regurgitating what they're hearing on the mainstream media?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I was having a discussion about this with a friend of mine who works in academia. He's a tenured professor at a major state university system. And, I think what we're dealing with here in a very real sense is a cult. And that sounds outrageous to the people who are in the cult because they're in the cult. But they have been programmed. They've almost been conditioned, like Pavlov did with his dogs, right? You do this behavioral conditioning process, and we're seeing this. It's not just coming from the media. It's not just CNN. It's also the K through 12 public school system. It's the government academia, the universities. They're conditioning the younger generation to really be unthinking, and yet to think of themselves as these critical thinkers. That's really one of the incredible ironies here, is that these people who are so brainwashed and are doing no thinking of their own really regard themselves as the critical thinkers. But I think what we are dealing with here really are the symptoms of a cult, and there have been a growing number of parents now whose children go off to university, and they're having to hire professional cult deprogrammers to try to get their children back, because their children go and they come back and they're unrecognizable. They're like Marxist revolutionary cult members. And so these parents are paying like $300 an hour to use. These are the same tactics that these professionals use to deprogram members who get sucked into cults, like Jim Jones's thing, right? Where they're told that anybody who brings in outside information is bad and is hostile. And so you shouldn't even, it's not that you should evaluate the information, the evidence that's being brought to your attention. It's that you need to just shut down and start drooling and shout things like racist or sexist or religious nut, or whatever terminology they're supposed to respond with. It's very dangerous, actually. It's incredibly dangerous. And during the COVID pandemic, a term got really popularized by Matthias Desmet, a professor over in Belgium, called mass formation psychosis, where you have this kind of like population level psychosis, right, where people just kind of lose their minds. And unfortunately, I don't think we're out of the woods yet on that. I think we're still dealing with it.
Yeah, I think a great example I was thinking of, I was speaking to a friend of mine who is a good Catholic, who pretty much agrees with me on like 99.9% of things. And we're talking about conspiracy theories, and they were saying, oh, well, I just don't believe in conspiracy theories. I think conspiracy theories are just crazy. I just believe whatever is in front of me. And I was like, you don't believe in any conspiracy theories? Like none? Like any that people call conspiracy theories, and they like demonize the term. And talking to atheists, I'm saying, well, you believe in at least one conspiracy theory, right? You believe that the apostles in the New Testament did not conspired to fake the death, the resurrection of Christ, and convince the world that Christianity is true, and converted like 60% of the population of the world. Do you believe in that conspiracy, right? If you're an atheist. So I think, what about the term conspiracy theory in all this?
Yeah, that's a great point. The CIA actually back in the 1960s did a deliberate campaign to try to associate the term conspiracy and conspiracy theory with silliness, with absurdity. And they just did this endless repetition of calling ridiculous and idiotic things conspiracy theories or conspiracies, and then associating that with other things that were actually legitimate. And I think from the Christian perspective, you bring up an excellent point. And the Bible actually talks about multiple conspiracies. If you go back to Psalm 2, it says the kings of the earth conspire in some translations. Other translations use a synonym. They take counsel together against the Lord and his anointed one. And so thousands of years ago, during the time of David, powerful people were conspiring. And all these people who claim to be against conspiracy theories, if you tell them that local businessmen are conspiring to rip people off, or you tell them that some Fortune 500 companies colluded to rip off consumers or market some product that wasn't good, they'll be like, oh yeah, of course, corporations are evil, of course they conspire. But when you tell, there might be politicians, oh no, politicians would never conspire. And again, if they would spend 2 seconds examining these beliefs as a rational person, they'd say, well, of course there must be conspiracies, right? The definition of conspiracy is just two or more people working for some nefarious purpose in secret. There must be conspiracies everywhere. But all that requires at least some degree of critical thinking, and they are being conditioned, again, not to think about these things.
Well, we know that Adam Schiff conspired with Twitter to suppress his opponents and to suppress the people he did not like, apparently, which, by the way, let's not forget, we also learned that the federal government had a back-end portal with which they could log in and do their own censoring. They didn't even need to bother anybody at Twitter anymore. I mean, this is just really, really bizarre. But let me switch gears here a little bit and move to Davos. I do believe they're tangentially related. In the last segment, I was talking about some of the agenda items on 2023 Davos as everybody gathers over there. And digital censorship, although they're not using that word, is on the agenda. They want to have digital data flows that are global. They want to control the types of information that's allowed out there. They're using the term cybersecurity. But when you read that, you're like, they mean censorship. They mean to control the narrative on a global scale. What are your thoughts on the Davos 2023 agenda?
Yeah, Davos is, I think, one of the most nefarious front groups for this Orwellian totalitarian global agenda. And they've really come out of the closet on their desire to silence everybody. In fact, it was just a few months ago the UN communications czar. I forget her full title, but it's something like a director of Undersecretary General of Communications or something. Melissa Fleming was on a podcast for the World Economic Forum and was bragging about how they have reached a partnership with Google to silence what they describe as climate misinformation and to promote the UN's viewpoint on this. Now, I've experienced this up close and personal. I go to these UN climate summits. I just got back a few weeks ago from the one in Egypt. I've been covering the UN for over a decade as a journalist, and my articles used to be the top search result at Google. If you would type in Agenda 2030, which the UN describes as the master plan for humanity, that's their terminology, not mine. And of course, that's almost blasphemous, right? God can have a master plan for humanity, not the UN. But I did an article about that, and it was the top search result. If you typed in Google Agenda 2030, UN Agenda 2030, Sustainable Development Goals, almost whatever terms you used, my article was result number one for years and years. Wow. And then one day it just completely disappeared. It's gone. You can't find it, even if you have the exact title. Google has literally de-indexed it. And so what happens now? Now you get like 10 pages of UN propaganda about Agenda 2030 before you actually get to anything from an outside source. And you don't even find critical things for pages and pages and pages. So the UN and the World Economic Forum are very open now about their desire to do this. I bet it's a story I've been covering for a long time. The European Union is very much in on this as well. And they have conscripted the big tech companies, including Microsoft, including Google, including Facebook and Twitter and all the rest of them. And this is so dangerous, right? Because we used to talk about the marketplace of ideas, where the best ideas would rise to the top. And the answer to bad ideas was more speech, right? Correct ideas. Well, what happened now? They realized their lies couldn't even compete in a rigged marketplace, right? They tried rigging their algorithms. They tried shadow banning people. And what happened? People were still so hungry for the truth that they were seeking this stuff out. And so now they just decided, well, we just have to completely take you off. We just have to completely remove you. And this is so dangerous to humanity, not just in medicine, not just in science, but in everything, right? If we can't have an honest and open discussion, it leads to catastrophe.
Yeah. Wow. So much to be on the hunt for here, looking at this information, because they also want to put those brain implants. Going back to Musk as we wrap this conversation up, Musk is a big transhumanist. He would love to see that. He has a company that's looking into that right now, which is why we can't trust him as far as we could throw him. But we are grateful that he has made this information public. But Alex Newman, libertysentinel.org. God bless you. God love you. Thank you for your time today.
God bless you guys. Thank you so much.
All right, we appreciate it. That's going to do it for hour number one. If you can join us in the second hour, we would surely love to have you. Of course, we'll have the game show plus the after show to talk directly with you. But then I want to talk about some Gen Z trends out there. Do you know anybody in the Gen Z trend, like Adrian, for instance? We're going to talk about that coming up right after the break. Otherwise, we'll see you right back here tomorrow morning. God bless you. God love you. We'll see you then.